Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. I had breakfast this morning and was reading just a few tweets from people on comics Twitter, and I have a lot of synapses firing. The problem is I have a lot of separate ideas, which I think might be connected in a vague way, but I'm not sure how to connect them properly. So rather than sit down and try to write this all out and organize it into a really good presentation, I just want to summa tangentum, just talk out loud about these few separate ideas I have and why I think they're all important for people interested in comics. You might say the Comicsgate community. I've talked before about how I don't like the term Comicsgate, but I'm comfortable saying there's a Comicsgate community. The people who found each other, kind of began talking about comics through that hashtag, were connected through a shared interest in the Diversity in Comics channel, use the hashtag Move the Needle to signal when they're buying comic books. And even though I don't have a formal connecting point for all of these yet, maybe the central question would be, what do you want to accomplish by talking about comic books online, whether that's on Twitter or by starting a YouTube channel? What's the end game? Do you just want better comics? Do you want a healthy industry? Do you want more polite behavior from professionals? These are all good end games, but one of the things I'm thinking about is, what is the end game of an SJW? Do they just want to stir the pot and upset people with a little social justice politics? Anyway, this is where the tangents start coming in. So the immediate prompt for this video is a Crumple Point tweet, actually, where he writes, "So without talking to each other, Douglas Ernst, Mim Headroom, Diversity in Comics, and myself all produced videos on an aesthetic theme within about 2 days of each other. Haha. Their videos are shown below, respectively." And then someone commented back to him that this is a good example of how we're not all coordinating with one another like a secret little club or a secret little clique. We're just sort of naturally talking about similar topics and ideas because I think there has to be, at least, even if there's a diversity of religious and philosophical and political perspectives amongst people who don't want SJW politics and comics, I think there has to be at least a little bit that we share in common to make sense of why are we talking about similar things. So I also had a interaction with Douglas Ernst, and I think he'd be okay with me talking about this, even though it was a DM, because it was just very polite and very generic. He pretty much made the point to me that the wonderful thing about this community is you can have people with 60,000 subscribers, there are people with 6,000 subscribers, there are people with 60 subscribers, and you can always find an interesting video or an interesting perspective. There's a lot of thoughtful people thinking about comics and politics in comics from a range of perspectives, and there's a range of popularities amongst these groups. And I'd say I'm definitely in the bottom tier of, Zach will joke about how he's in the bottom tier of comics YouTubers, and I'm kind of at nearly at the bottom tier of the bottom tier, and that's okay, because what I want to get at is there are things since the topics that people are talking about is, we're talking about more than just comics. We're talking about morals. We're talking about political movements like the social justice movement. We're talking about beauty and goodness and truth. I was so happy when Diversity in Comics made that video in response to Douglas Ernst, because this is something I've been trying to sound alarm bells on, is that there is a anti-beauty wave within progressive art academia, and it's not just a minority. It tends to be the overwhelming, it tends to be the majority position that beauty is bad. And we have to train students as soon as possible to stop making beautiful stuff and start being social justice activists in the arts. And that I want this channel, in the end, when I look back at this channel years later, I want to say I did an effective job showing that this is the case in the American university system. The degradation of art to political movements, the personal is political. The reason I'm thinking about that is that if that's your goal, then it's not important if you get popularity or a what do you call it, a second income from YouTube. I have a good job. I'm happy with my job. I don't need YouTube to be my job. But because I care about these topics. That's what makes me motivated to talk about it. Whether I get, I love all 270 of you guys who have subscribed to me, and it just, that feedback is great. It's positive, but I'm okay with a small following or a large following because I care about the topics. And I started this channel kind of wanting to talk about these topics. If I had one follower, if one follower on planet Earth would listen to me and tell me that I wasn't insane, then it would be worth it for me to talk about these topics. Okay. So, and the general question for everyone is, what do you want to accomplish with your life to help others? I would like, when I die, to be the comics industry to be in a better state than when I started. So, I've already mentioned the channels that sort of prompted me to think about this, how they all started talking about aesthetics at the same time, and I think this is exactly right. We needed more people to talk about this, even if aesthetics aren't their main focus all the time. We need to. I think even people who have other focuses should at least be aware of what other channels are doing. So I'm not that into trying to follow professionals looking for unprofessional behavior, but I really appreciate that umbrella guy just documenting the horrible rudeness from comics professionals to fans, because we need to have that. We need to be able to document just what the bad behavior is, so we can kind of understand what our current state of affairs is. And I've appreciated him talking about individualism. All right. Thesis 1, revisiting Gamergate. I mentioned in my address, my letter, Dear Comicsgate, how I thought we were different than Gamergate. And Edwin Boyette, who makes videos, everyone in comics Twitter kind of knows him because he talks to people by video. He gives kind of really thoughtful life advice. Edwin Boyette responded to me and kind of reinforced the point that, yes, comics followers are a much smaller group than gamers. And he kind of made the point that all of the really passionate comics fans had probably heard of diversity in comics at this point just from the videos being shared around so much. So there might be some normies who like Captain America but don't bother paying attention to drama on comics Twitter or comics YouTube. And most of the passionate people who want to talk about this have been made aware of what the Comicsgate community is, or the Move the Needle hashtag. All right. So one point I would like to make is that we've seen examples of sites like Bleeding Cool doing hit pieces on Comicsgate or YouTubers, but why haven't we seen something like what happened to Gamergate, where there was this sort of coordinated effort from journalists to lambaste them and paint them as evil? Well, I think one reason for that is we're smaller. We're at a point where leftists in the mainstream media could take it or leave it. They could maybe look at us and say, okay, well, they're a harassment campaign, and then ignore us, or they might actually care about it. They're kind of ambivalent about us at this point, generally. Now, if there came a point where we were having more influence and we were starting to see more positive changes, say if Marvel just threw out its SJW agenda entirely and gave our boy Zach, the Diversity in Comics channel, exactly the kind of stories he would want, then I think we would start to see more people who are not comics fans or obsessed with comics paying attention to us, because oh boy, all right, summa tangentum. Okay, here's the perfect illustration. Before Diversity in Comics had 10,000 subscribers, no one cared what he had to say. And then after he got about 20,000 subscribers, suddenly all of these comics pros were very, very interested in what he had to say. It was like a switch flipped. He went from a nobody to snap warning, boom. Now he's the evil emperor of Comicsgate. And I think the same thing could happen. The same thing that happened to Zach could happen to all of us if we continue to gain influence. So we're at a point where, maybe things will just settle. Maybe the dust will just settle. Maybe we'll just start getting good comics, and we won't have to just argue about bad, unprofessional behavior from comics pros every day, and we won't need that to happen. I'm not saying we want that to happen. I'm not saying we want a big fat culture war. I'm just saying these are two things that could happen. So one possibility is things kind of settle down, we get good comics, we're happy. Another thing that could happen is the headbutting with comics pros and comics companies continues. And one thing that could happen is if the mainstream media and if art, and if the progressive academics, the people who are gender studies professors, the people who are queer theory professors, the people who are kind of feminist theory professors, if they decided that Comicsgate was worth attacking and defeating, then I think things would start to crank up for 11. Okay, so here we go. I wanted to add my own rule to the laws of SJWs. So Vox Day, who I do not endorse, famously has said SJWs always lie, SJWs always project, SJWs always double down. And then the Diversity in Comics channel kind of jokingly add to that, SJWs always turn on you, because one SJW, if they can't find someone on the right or someone in the center to go after, they'll find another SJW, they'll find something problematic, and they'll go after them for that. I would like to add a kind of unofficial fifth rule, which is that SJWs always miss the point. I don't think that when I say SJWs, I mean a particular group of people who are very, very bad at paying attention to how their behavior is affecting people, who are very set in trying to attack and destroy things they don't like. So it's a very toxic set of behaviors in addition to a political commitment to social justice activism. And what I think they miss is that they don't get how their behavior affects people. If you call somebody a blankety blank, they're not going to be likely to say, oh boy, I embrace social justice now. Thank you for calling me a blankety blank. Or a sexist, racist, homophobe, transphobe, bigot. They're going to be more likely to just say F you and then laugh at SJWs. So what the reason I think this is important is because I don't think SJWs get how their behavior affects people. I think there are going to be more and more SJWs who are going to be willing to pick a fight with people in comics, whether or not those people in comics are on the right or in the center or on the left, or care about politics or religion or not. You could just entirely be committed to wanting to enjoy good comics and not care one iota about the culture wars or political or philosophical discussions about social justice. But an SJW won't care if you're not on the side of social justice. You're an enemy, and they'll go after you, and they will create their own enemies by driving people away. So I'm not making a prediction, but I anticipate that SJWs are going to continue driving people, continue to start picking fights. I think the entire comics fight was a fight picked by SJWs, where I was interested in politics, I was interested in philosophy. That's one of the things that interested me about Gamergate. But a lot of people who were just normal comics readers who were looking for an escape from politics suddenly found their hobby politicized. Okay, so I anticipate that SJWs are going to keep being nasty to people, and they're going to keep cranking up the intensity on Comicsgate until a tipping point comes, and then suddenly every mainstream media outlet is going to be interested in these topics. They're going to see the relevance of whether Captain America is portrayed as a woke SJW or as kind of a conservative representation of American patriotism and American values. Everyone, people who do not read comic books obsessively, see the importance of a character like Captain America to the culture. Douglas Ernst talks about the importance of culture all the time on his channel. I just refer you to that if you haven't already. Okay, so that's the point about SJWs. The second thing I'm thinking about a lot is Satan, because I'm rereading C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters for the first time since high school, and I'm seeing connections to social justice activism, the social justice art school where I trained, and I'm making connections between that and Douglas Ernst on Jordan D. Peterson, Jordan D. Peterson's other videos, Gamergate. That's the problem, is all of these are firing, and I haven't kind of settled all the connections yet. But so for Satan and C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, those are going to be their own videos, probably a video talking about the chapter that C.S. Lewis wrote that sparked me, and then a video talking about the comic book by Marvel Comics on the Screwtape Letters and, how it's talking about the art of it, a comic review. But all I'll say for now is C.S. Lewis got me started to think about Satan. And even if you're an atheist, I think the point I want to make is that thinking about Satan this way is relevant. I'm a believing Christian, so I think Satan is real. But if you're an atheist and you don't think Satan is real, thinking about thinking about the character of Satan from the Bible and how he influenced people is still completely relevant, because you can find examples of people in real life using those kind of tactics. I think that's what Jordan D. Peterson is trying to get at in his Bible series. I don't know if Jordan D. Peterson believes in the Bible or that Jesus is God or not, but I think he's interested in the Bible as something which represents ideas which are important even for atheists to understand. And maybe I've only just listened to him talk a little bit. I haven't gone through his Bible series yet, so I'll save talking about Jordan D. Peterson for another day. But the point is that Satan doesn't just show up and say, hey guys, evil's great, let's all be evil. Satan manipulates people subtly. And I see those tendencies in social justice circles where I was a student, and these were my classmates. And what I want to say is, I've said this over and over again, but I often feel pity for social justice warriors, and I don't hate them, because some of these kids were my friends. And when I hear people talking about sort of groupthink, or talking about unhappy people who are scared of their peers, I saw that and I experienced that. I was scared of being outed as a conservative and getting sent to the principal's office for problematic thinking. And I recognized that even my friends who were not Christians, or my friends who were social justice warriors, all of them were scared of that too, and very guarded in how they interacted with people. So the reason I feel so much sympathy for social justice warriors is, in my mind, I can see people who were my friends in school who were very unhappy, and a contributing factor to their unhappiness was this sort of groupthink religion of social justice, which demanded of them their participation in social justice activism, but didn't offer them something. The thing about Christianity is it's got Jesus, and Jesus is great, right? So Christianity, might demand of you to, do the right thing. Don't have sex outside of marriage. Don't do drugs. But then it has the positive of Jesus in heaven. SJWism as a religion sucks as a religion, because it has all these, it has all the demands on you. Oh, you're sinful. You are guilty of white guilt. You can never expunge the guilt of white guilt. You must do penance by doing social justice activism and checking your privilege. But there's no good stuff. They don't have a Jesus. They don't have a heaven. So it sucks to be an SJW. It's like having all of the, in Christianity, it's like having all of the law and none of the gospel. We've got all of the rules that you've got to fulfill because you are a sinner and you can't live up to God's standard. But we're going to have none of the grace which redeems you and saves you from that. So that, yeah, boy, that was a really religious metaphor. But that's why I feel sympathy for social justice warriors. They are acting as if social justice is their religion. The alt-right. So, like I said, I have no idea how to smoothly transition to these. I'm just going to talk about all of them. The alt-right. Everyone calls Comicsgate alt-right Nazi movement, and that's not true. And the way you can see that wasn't true is the fight between Vox Day and Ethan Van Sciver in Diversity in Comics, where I think most people in Comicsgate were not on Vox Day's side or excited for alt hero. I don't know if Vox Day is alt-right himself, or if he's just making a comic that's using sort of alt-right imagery kind of to get money out of them. I don't know. So I'm not going to pontificate on Vox Day without going and listening to him myself. All I'll say is, just from what I've read of him, he does at least seem to be closer to the alt-right than most of us are, or more sympathetic to the alt-right than most of us are. But that's just me speaking based on reading a few tweets, not reading his books or anything. So the fact that so many people were uninterested in alt hero tells me that the Comicsgate or Move the Needle movement is not an alt-right movement. It's a movement of comic book fans who just, the only shared thing is we don't like SJW propaganda in our comic books. Okay. Edwin Boyette, again, you should go check out Edwin Boyette's channel. He talks to the alt-right guys a lot. He is not alt-right. He's just talking to them about what they think, and he'll kind of vouch that Comicsgate is not an alt-right movement. He's interacted with tons of people in Comicsgate. He does not. He doesn't meet people who espouse alt-right views in Comicsgate. Okay, I guess sidebar. tangent within tangent within tangent. It's good that we have different focuses, because I don't know if I'd have time to go read a bunch of alt-right stuff to get a really informed perspective on it. So it's nice to have people like Edwin Boyette, paying attention to that, so I can kind of get a finger on the pulse of what they're up to in comics without trying to go become an expert in everything myself. But what I wanted to say about the alt-right is this connects to SJWs not getting how their behavior affects people. So I think the alt-right would disappear almost instantly or overnight if SJWs disappeared. I think most people who join the alt-right or who are sympathetic to the alt-right are driven that way because of anti-whiteness in progressive academia. So they meet these sort of toxic bullies who say, you're a straight white male, you need to check your privilege, your whiteness is the problem. And then they're judged on the basis of their skin color. And then, so their choices are, well, I could submit, I could kowtow and join the social justice side. I could be constantly checking my privilege and mind killing myself to be a good ally and constantly listen and believe and accept criticism from people who are less privileged than myself. Or if they're a little bit more combative, they could say, well, if I'm a straight white male, okay, well then I'll go join all the other straight white males. And I think that's exactly what the alt-right relies upon to recruit people. This was last year, I think. I watched this really creepy Richard Spencer video where it was all about how you are special, Europe is special, and kind of in parentheses, because you're white is the reason you are special. And I'm not the most, charismatic Christian. Charismatics are Christians who kind of look for miracles and acts of God everywhere. I think that I don't think that God, makes people like shake around on the ground, or have like a fit. So I'm a little bit more of a skeptic when it comes to people talking about miraculous experiences they have. But even though I believe that God can act and create miracles, I'm suspicious of miracles, because what I'm suspicious of is someone trying to indoctrinate you into a cult by saying, hey, I do miracles, I've got a great new religion, come follow me. But what I'll say is, never in my life have I heard the voice of Satan and said, oh my gosh, there is a Satan, than when I heard Richard Spencer trying to recruit me to the alt-right, because that's the whole point. So that, see what I was talking about, how I don't know how to connect these, but I feel like they're connected. Reading C.S. Lewis, reading about Satan, reading about manipulation. The whole argument Richard Spencer is trying to make is that to a person to a white person, and particularly a straight white male who feels downtrodden and overburdened by social justice, he's making the pitch that you are special on the basis of your race. Join with us, and we as a collective will give you a sense of belonging, and will give you a feeling of place. And the reason I say that was like the strongest moment in life where I could feel like I say, there is a Satan. This is proof that Satan exists. Checkmate, atheist. Well, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek, but my point is that's a great act of manipulation. It is manipulating people based on experiences they've had of being attacked for being straight white males by elite, powerful academics in the university system. And because the left doesn't see how its actions affect people, they're going to continually drive young, impressionable young men who, by attacking them and damaging them and checking their privilege and doing call-out culture, they're going to continually drive young men out of the arms of the social justice activists into the arms of the alt-right. And this concerns me because I'll see videos of white nationalists punching Antifa in the street, and I'll think, oh great, is this the end? Is this the decline and fall of America? I think there's a lot of people who have this anxiety about our future, even though we should be really happy about our future. We have a lot of new technology. This is the best time to be alive in terms of having advanced medicine and to be able to communicate with others by the internet instantly. This is an incredible time to be alive. But a lot of people have this sense of dread that our society is crumbling and falling apart. And I think a reason for that is we're seeing the rise of these political extremists slowly gaining more and more momentum and more influence. So I guess the point I wanted to make is that the way to protect yourself from that is to be wary of Lucifer's style of manipulation. He doesn't manipulate you by saying, "Hey guys, you know what's great? Racism." He manipulates you by saying, "Poor you. The mean social justice warriors were mean to you because you're white. Come join us. Join our collective, and we will give you a place of belonging." Good manipulation uses a good thing. It holds up a good thing in front of you and says, "I will give you this good thing," and it really is good, a place of belonging, a sense of love and community. But then after it gets you hooked, then you're part of the cult. Then you're part of the groupthink. You're either part of the alt-right or you're part of the social justice warrior left. They hold up justice, the social justice warrior left. They hold up justice as the good thing they say they want to have. We want equality. We want justice. We want fairness. Join our movement, and we will make a better world for all. And then you're hooked, and then suddenly you're on Twitter screaming at people and calling them racist, sexist, homophobes because you think that somehow is going to change the world and make it more moral. All right, so to try to tie this all up and put a bow on it, I'm thinking about the debate that Mr. Metokur had with Sargon of Akkad. And people have been saying Gamergate's been dead for a while, but if you would ask me to point at any one point and say, how do you know Gamergate is dead? I would point at Sargon of Akkad and Mr. Metokur yelling at each other on a live stream and say, that's the death of Gamergate. That's when Gamergate is no longer really a thing. You're either on Mr. Metokur's side or you're on Sargon's side, and it's not a forceful movement whatsoever anymore. I think Gamergate kind of won and lost. They got most of what they want. I mean, sure, the progressives are still very influential in games journalism, but games make the kind of stuff that most gamers want. So I guess that's my point, is Comicsgate could grow and explode, or it could equalize. If we all started to get what we want, just sort of fun fantasy stories, things might equalize. If SJW creators could end the Comicsgate fight by giving people what they want, not political propaganda, fun stories. But I don't think it's going to end. Here we go. There are going to be more waves. Have you ever thought about how there was first wave feminism and second wave feminism and third wave feminism, and what that means? That feminism didn't just come overnight, but the ideas came gradually in the form of waves, and an older feminist like Christina Hoff Sommers might be completely horrified by campus feminists and their nutty anti-free speech behavior. Well, I think what we experienced in Comicsgate and Gamergate was a wave of progressive academic philosophizing creeping its way into popular art. And no matter what we do, there will come a second wave and a third wave and a fourth wave, as long as there are activists who want to use popular arts to promote their political and moral beliefs. We're going to keep having these waves. They may be bigger waves, they may be smaller waves, but more waves are coming down the road. So the question is, will things kind of equalize? Will the companies say, okay, we sell comics to normal people, to the move the needle people. We're going to make comics for them. So things in that situation, things might die down. In another situation, the professionals might crank it up and say, oh, you don't like our social justice politics? Well, here's 10 times more social justice politics in your comics. Now Captain America is a gay, black, Latina communist. How do you like that? So, but regardless, fast forward 20 years, when the art students and the writing students and the political science students come out of the universities and they go get jobs at Marvel Comics and DC Comics, we will have a second wave where they're going to once again want to change things and reintroduce their politics into a popular media, into comics. So I guess what I'm getting at is, this is why I'm trying to think about the long game rather than the short game. So I've talked about how I don't like Twitter drama, even though I've talked about my Twitter drama with a few professionals on this channel. It really, really stung me when Comicstorian wrote a letter to me and he described my channel as a drama channel, because I'm kind of consciously trying to avoid that. The reason I'm trying to consciously avoid this being a drama channel is I think drama helped destroy Gamergate as an effective movement, and that drama is only good for sort of temporary, immediate distraction or humor, but in the longer run, it becomes less and less important. Do you remember what the big drama was between Twitter and YouTube channels just a few weeks ago or a few months ago. Some of it's important if the drama is rooted in people talking about unprofessional behavior or the comics industry, or it was rooted in an important argument that is important for everybody. But kind of petty fighting is something that is fun to watch. That's why so many people watch it. Is there's sort of this kind of cool gossip aspect of it. Oh boy, look who's fighting who. But it won't be important 10 or 20 years from now. And what I'm trying to make this channel is something that 10 or 20 years from now, regardless of whether I have a large following or not, I want to be able to look back on most of my videos and say most of the videos I've made continue to have relevance today, even long after I first made them, which is one reason why I've been kind of quietly transitioning behind the scenes, buying more digital comics in order to do more professional podcasts. I want to step it up gradually and stop joking about how unprofessional I am and get to the point where I feel very professional in the content I'm producing, so that can start to have a longer impact, where you could come back to my video a few years down the road and it would still be relevant to the next big political fight in comics, when some young person in art school right now comes out of art school and then they get to draw Captain America, and they draw Captain America looking like a feminine Bishi boy to promote some sort of gender politics. I want the things I have to say now to be relevant then, when we're still talking about these kinds of things. So that's not to dig on anyone who talks about drama online. I think that is very important to understand what comics pros are saying, and I value that. All I'm saying is I think it's good for a lot of us to have a future focus as well as a present focus. We should be paying attention to what's coming out of the universities, what they want to accomplish, and be aware that even if we get most of what we want and we start getting good comics, this is going to keep being a problem. There's going to keep being an anti-beauty, anti-goodness, anti-success, anti-capitalist vibe creeping its way into comic books. And I'd like to see something better than Gamergate. I would like to, when we look back at this 10 years from now, I'd like us to be able to say that whatever Comicsgate was, of all the diverse people who participated in it, if you compared Comicsgate to Gamergate, I would like to be able to say that they ran a tighter ship than Gamergate did, where my perception of Gamergate is it kind of succeeded, they kind of got what they wanted, but it's dead. And I mentioned the Sargon of Akkad, Mr. Metokur debate. That's a good example of why it's dead. It was a really petty argument with lots of yelling and personal things. But here's what's important about that, if you're not that into Gamergate. So Mr. Metokur and Sargon of Akkad were probably the two most popular Gamergate channels, I think. I think Mundane Matt might be a third place. And they represented kind of two different perspectives. So, Mr. Metokur, he used to be called Internet Aristocrat. He was really interested in the juicy gossip. He was really interested in going after SJW pros for a while. And Sargon was always a little bit more conciliatory. He would get in people's faces. He'd throw some FUs at SJWs. But Sargon was always a little bit more politically minded. And so then years later, after Gamergate has ended, they have this debate. And what's interesting about it is it's kind of a petty personal debate where they're yelling at each other, but it was also a debate about their different perspectives. So Mr. Metokur was making fun of Sargon for calling himself a liberalist. Like, what does that even mean? And in Metokur used very blunt language to make fun of Sargon. He kind of accused Sargon of just being way too full of himself. And I even though I was kind of on Sargon's side for that debate, I see what Mr. Metokur was saying. Sargon transitioned from being a Gamergater to being a political commentator, and he's often had a kind of maybe a bit of a British stuffiness to the way he talks about topics. In contrast, Mr. Metokur is just the high school bully that everyone likes. He just roasts the hell out of everybody. He makes fun of everybody. He's completely blunt. He's completely over the top in how he insults people. He goes right for the jugular in the most personal insult he can possibly come up with. And Mr. Metokur, I don't think, was ever interested in changing the world or changing the comics industry or the gaming industry. He was a gamer who was ticked off at SJWs, and for a while he talked about that in Gamergate, and then he moved on to just sort of talk about funny stuff on the internet. So Sargon is trying to change. So if Sargon is trying to change the world, Metokur is someone who's a bit more cynical and just wants to point and laugh at dumb stuff going on in the world, and who thinks it's overly idealistic to think that you can change the world. And they both have a point. I think Sargon is right that it is possible to change things if you argue for what's true and you argue for what's right and you try to persuade people away from dumb ideas like social justice towards better ideas like freedom of speech, the rule of law, due process. I think people who believe in those things should be trying to persuade people of the value of things like due process and the Constitution and freedom of speech. But I think Mr. Metokur is right that there's an element of futility to that. If someone doesn't want to believe in free speech, if someone wants to believe in social justice as their religion, then good arguments are going to bounce right off them. So that's the trouble, is it's possible to change people's minds. It's possible to have a change in the industry. It's possible to have a positive effect, but it's also possible that you could invest all this time and effort and change nothing. So I guess my takeaway is don't be too self-important, and that might be more a message to myself. I want to talk about important things, but I don't want to become self-important and self-referential where this whole channel is just about me talking about my petty grievances and who insulted me and how special I am. I want this to be a channel where I talk about important things that I think are important today and are going to be important later. And I would love for the disparate group of people, from different religious perspectives, from different political perspectives, who have used the hashtag Comicsgate or have used the hashtag Move the Needle to eventually be able to say that we've done something good with our time. We've left the comics industry in a better state than when we found it. I think our diversity of opinions is a key element of that. Oh, excuse me. So I think I've talked about most of what I wanted to talk about in my crazy get your GIF ready of that guy in front of the conspiracy theory board and the map connecting all the different pictures. So that's what this was. I just wanted to say it all out loud, get it in a Summa Tangentum video so I could return to this later and maybe try to restate it more formally. Was there anything I missed or that I wanted to say? I love you guys. I'll catch you later. I think I'm going to end it there. Peace.